Hello everybody and welcome to That's Football. Yesterday there was a big mistake when the Premier League ranked Pep Guardiola, Arteta, Emery, De Zerbi, Silva and Eddie Howe as the best 6 Premier League managers this season. I don't agree with it. We're going to rank all the Premier League managers this season in specific ranked areas. In fact, I may as well just show you how we're going to do it. So we're going to have get in the bin, below par, reasonable season, very good and superb. And we're going to go through it and we're going to rank them and you can get your comments in below as per usual. But we're doing this we're doing it, we're intelligent. The That's Football community is intelligent. We're not doing mates rates and we do actually watch football. So whilst it is Premier League, we are going to consider what's gone on outside the Premier League, how they've performed in the Champions League, Europe, the volume of games they've played, because that all impacts. If you've got a full week off between games and then another manager's got to play Thursday night or Wednesday night, of course that has an impact. So let's get into it. We're ranking every Premier League manager this season. And first of all, we're going to start off with Mikel Arteta, who's had a very good season, and I would put him in straight at superb. And I'll tell you why I'll put him in at superb, because I think he's had a superb season. We hear these stories that they want Declan Rice, they want Caicedo, which means he wants to improve his midfield, and yet they've been the second best team in the Premier League this season. They could have won the Premier League this season. Nobody put them in the top 4 at the start of the season. He has had a superb season, even though it has ultimately ended up being quite disappointing. Next manager, let's do De Zerbi. I mean, I have got to say he's had a superb season, but I could also must put him in very good. I mean, I'm sort of, I like Brighton, I like De Zerbi, but is it a little bit hype? One of my mates said he's just a wish Jose Mourinho skidding down the touchline on his knees. I like Brighton, I like De Zerbi, but you know what? They've had a bit of unlucky. They've been a bit unlucky with VAR, but they could finish 8th. The season is a season. On one hand, you've got people having a pop at Arteta saying he bottled it, which I don't think he did. I think it's a 38-game season and you end up where you end up. And I have to be consistent with De Zerbi as well. If they finish 5th, they've had a great season. If they finish 6th, they've had a great season. If they finish 7th, 8th or 9th, I think it's been a very good season. And look, Brighton haven't been in Europe. They haven't been in Europe. They haven't really made a massive impact on the cups. I know they got to the semi-final of the FA Cup, which was at Wembley, and it was a day out for them. I'm a massive fan of Brighton. I think everybody is. But is it a little bit overhyped if they finish the season badly? The Everton result, the Newcastle result, they're poundings. So, I'm sort of stuck between superb and very good. And I think, look, you can hype things up a little bit too much. So I'm going to go very good. Dean Smith's up next. I mean, look, if he gets, I think get in the bin. I mean, if he comes in and gets them relegated, it was a weird appointment, and I think they will get relegated. So I think it's got to go low there. You know what? Steve Cooper's coming in next for Forest. I'm going to put him at reasonable, because I think even if they get relegated, basically loads of players in the Premier League. I mean, you don't know where you're going, and I think the stability and not to have been relegated as quick as some people thought, and the fact that they could stay up, I think he could end up having a very good season if he stays up, and I think even if they go down, it's a reasonable season for him. Sean Dyche, very difficult to say. I would say reasonable at the moment. That Everton-Brighton result was absolutely incredible, as we know, but they've got to stay up. He could move. Some of these managers could move, of course. We're doing it before the end of the season. Eddie Howe, superb. There ain't no doubt about it. There ain't no doubt about it. Eddie Howe has had a fantastic season, hasn't he? He's been incredible. They've got Champions League football now. That win against Brighton was immaculate. They surprised me, actually. I thought Brighton would give them a tougher game, but it probably disrespects just how good they are at home. Superb start to the season, superb end to the season. Yes, they're very rich and things are going to change at Newcastle. Demands are going to go up. Players are going to be leaving that are good players because they're going to replace them with better. They're on that journey to compete with Man City, and they will do. But in these early days, you can't really put it down to, the cheat code. I think it's come down to good management, good buys, and, really good football. So I would say absolutely, excuse me, incredible from Eddie Howe. Next up, we've got Emery, who I think I would put in very good. I would put in very good. Now, considering that those 4 are considered that they're there, the Premier League, They're the Premier League. They're in the top 6 Premier League. They're there for the shortlist. I think Emery's had a very good season, but again, a little bit like De Zerbi, if he don't finish in the top 6 and they finish 7th or 8th, he's done a great job in relation to the consistency and no transfer window and no pre-season. But I also think the Villa and Man United games were quite disappointing when, again, they had no European football off all week and they were very flat performances. So, look, I think he's done a very good job, Emery, and that's where I am with it. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see where it goes from there. Gary O'Neill, for me, has done a superb job. And I think it's criminal that he's not actually in the shortlist for Premier League Manager of the Year. Newly promoted team gets sacked Scott Parker. In comes Gary O'Neill after doing a great job as an interim manager, gets given the permanent job. Then it's the honeymoon's over and you think, yeah, they're going to get relegated. I and many other people said they were going to get relegated. And then they pull out these amazing results at the end of the season. It's a little bit like a lower league version of Newcastle, because it started well, bit of a blip in the middle, although Newcastle's blip was basically drawing and not scoring. And then a very strong end to the season. He's done a superb job. I mean, the fact that Marco Silva gets into the shortlist and Gary O'Neill doesn't make any sense to me. But there we go. Who are we going next? Pep Guardiola, I'm going to come back to in a minute. Hodgson, very good. Very good from Roy Hodgson, what he's done at Crystal Palace. I know it's a bit of a cameo, but he's done a great job there, Roy Hodgson. And, you know, it's a difficult one for Palace because I think it's an age thing, isn't it? And if Roy's healthy and happy to carry on, they should keep him for another year because the end to the season for Palace, the goals they've scored, the football they've played, it's been very good. So why would you not stick with him for another year? It's not long term, of course, but yeah, that's what I would do with that. Jurgen Klopp, I'd say below par. And the great thing about Jurgen Klopp is I think he would admit it himself that it is below par. If they get Champions League football, I'd push it up to reasonable. But if they don't get Champions League, it's below par because Liverpool's standards set by Jurgen Klopp himself over recent years has been to compete with the superb category. They are probably going to miss out on top 4, especially because of that Newcastle result last night. If Man United beat Bournemouth this weekend, yes, they've ended the season well, but the 2/3 of the season before that is why they're not in the top 4. So it's been a disappointing season for Liverpool, and I think you have to acknowledge that it would be below par for Jurgen Klopp this season. Of course, there is still a retainer there that if they get top 4, it could be very different. Lampard, get in the bin. Whether it's Chelsea or it's Everton, I mean, he's done very well to be in employment for a full season. You know, he's been picking up a wage for most of the season, hasn't he? I know that gap between Everton and Chelsea, but a dreadful season for him at Everton and at Chelsea as well. The less said, the better. Lopetegui at Wolves, I would say, has been reasonable. Wolverhampton Wanderers took their time. I think he's a good manager. They've still got this identity of being hard to score against but can't score goals. Be interesting to see what he can do with them in the summer. They need to change that identity. They're hard on the eye sometimes. But he's come in and stabilised Wolves. And that Wolves were a team that was looking at relegation at one point. And they've never really looked at like that this year in 2023. So he's done a reasonable job there. Something they can build upon. David Moyes is controversial because I think it has to be below par. But then, and we're not looking at the Conference League, are we? So it has to be below par. Logically, David Moyes has to be below par. West Ham, I feel a bit weird doing it because they've just got into a Conference League final. If they win that, it's trophy and you're into the Europa League. And Europa League really is, you expect that when you finish 6th or 5th in the Premier League. So Europa League football for West Ham is brilliant. But they got into the Conference League because they finished 7th last year. They've been in a relegation battle. So be interesting what West Ham do with Moyes because he's shown in recent weeks that he's still a good manager and what he can do. But is it time to make a change? I think it's been a below par season for West Ham, considering where they finished last year and the players they've got. It's been below par. But the Conference League obviously gives some context to that. And it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge it. And also, I think you have to acknowledge it in the sense that West Ham probably lost some points this season and got dragged into a relegation battle because of the Conference League and the volume of games they've played. Most teams aren't used to having to play European football midweek, and it can impact you on the weekend. Who else have we got? Marco Silva. I think superb season for Marco Silva. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie on that one. I think Fulham are probably the most underrated team in the Premier League. I think if Mitrovic hadn't got the 8-game ban, they could be pushing the Brightons and the Liverpools and the Spurs for those European spots. They're not that far off, and for a newly promoted team, I think it's exceptional. Fulham have probably got lost in the volume of teams that are doing well, the Villas, the Brightons, the Brentfords. But I think Marco Silva, they're the best newly promoted team, and they've played some great football, and they've done a really, really good job. So I think he's had a superb season, Marco Silva, and there can be no doubts about that. Which brings me on to Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank is, he's almost somewhere between very good and superb, isn't he? I think for the side, I think it has to be superb. I do. I think it has to be superb, because if it's not superb, then we're lying. Really, their home form has been superb. It's Brentford. They're defying logic, being a top half team, and that's where they've been for most of the season. Ridiculously consistent at home, and again, probably a little bit like Fulham, a little bit underrated. And also, I must put my hands up and say I never even argued his case of being in the Premier League Manager of the Year shortlist. I think what Fulham and Brighton and Brentford have done this season has been absolutely incredible. So he has to be there. Which leaves us with the two big boys. I'm going to start off with Erik ten Hag, and I'm going to slip him into superb as well. I think that I'm going to have to move myself down here. Let me just move myself down, because obviously there might be another gap for somebody who's superb here. Erik ten Hag has to be superb. People are going to moan about this because they don't like Manchester United, but the cold, harsh fact is that Erik ten Hag this season has taken over the worst ever Man United Premier League side that didn't even hit 60 points for the first time in Premier League history for Manchester United. We're in the top 4. We should get top 4. We've got the best home defensive record. We've got the most clean sheets. He's built it on a strong defence. There has been some wobbles, obviously at Anfield and a couple of other places. But we've won more games than anybody else in the Premier League other than Arteta and Pep. He has to be in there. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. I think it's unfashionable to rate Ten Hag when actually it's glaringly obvious that you need to. And also, we've been playing so many games. Like, you're playing Thursday, Sunday for most of the season. That has to impact your Premier League form, and then yet we're still up there. So I think Ten Hag has to be in the superb category. There ain't no doubt about it. And then I think you've got Pep Guardiola who's last. And for me, Pep Guardiola goes into... you know what? I'm genuinely thinking about putting him in very good. Because I'll tell you for why. If he wins the treble, I'd put him in superb. If he doesn't win the treble, I'd put him in very good. And I'll tell you why, right? Don't be a hater on this. I'll tell you why. He's the best manager in the world, which means he's better than all of them anyway. So he's got a standard, which is why Klopp is below par, because he's not met the standard. So Pep's met the standard this year. They're going to win the Premier League. But he won the Premier League last year, and he's added the best striker in the world to his team. I predicted he'd win the Premier League. So has he done superb? I think you can put him there, but you can also put him very good, because I expected it. You know, they've got the best team with the best players, with the best squad and the best manager, and they were massive favourites to win the league, and they're going to win the league. So is that superb, or is that just they're that good? It's been it's not surprising. They win the treble, I would put him in superb. And people will be going, well, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't put him in superb if they win the treble, because the Premier League is Premier League Manager of the Year. But you can put him in superb if he wins the treble, because you are managing the workload, expectation and pressure of playing Cups and Champions League football in between Premier League games. Like what he did at Everton at the weekend, sandwiched in between Real Madrid, resting De Bruyne and Grealish and Silva and Stones, going away to Everton, who are fighting for their lives, and still winning. That's masterful, management, team management, which impacts the Premier League, but also the Champions League as well. So if they win the treble, he's got to go in at superb. If they don't win the treble, and we're just talking about the Premier League, I'd put him at very good, because what's superb about Man City this season that people didn't expect? They have become the consistent benchmark. And I used to say this about United when we were winning 3 Premier Leagues in a row and dominating it. There were certain seasons where you won the league and you didn't feel like you were superb. You just did what you do and you're used to doing. So it's a compliment in a way. Anyway, that is my tier list of Premier League managers. Get your comments in below. Therefore, the short list for me would be Ten Hag, Arteta, Howe, Gary O'Neill, Marco Silva, and probably Thomas Frank or Pep. So Emery and De Zerbi wouldn't be in for me. Get your comments in below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Don't forget, you can get one of these hoodies now. They're out. Links in the video description. Smash a like and subscribe. I'll speak to you in a bit.